The wind roared through the jagged peaks of the Silver Crest Mountains, carrying with it the scent of pine and the promise of snow. Elias Grayson stepped out of his weathered pickup truck, his boots crunching against the frost-covered gravel of the parking lot. He pulled his scarf tighter around his neck, the biting cold seeping through his layers despite the heavy coat he wore. At 42, Elias was no stranger to harsh winters, but there was something different about this one, an unease that gnawed at him as he gazed up at the sprawling expanse of Silver Crest Retreat, the luxury mountain lodge he'd built from the ground up 15 years ago. Back then, it had been a dream born from sleepless nights and endless sketches on napkins, a sanctuary where people could escape the chaos of their lives and find peace in the wild beauty of the mountains. He'd poured his heart into every detail, the hand-carved beams in the grand lobby, the massive stone fireplace that warmed guests on snowy nights, the trails he'd mapped out himself for hiking and skiing. For years, the retreat had thrived, its reputation growing as a haven of comfort and adventure. Elias had expanded it into a network of 5 locations across the region, each one a testament to his vision. But lately, the dream felt like it was slipping through his fingers. The guest reviews had started to sour, complaints about cold rooms, unresponsive staff, and broken amenities piling up like snowdrifts. Emails from his regional manager, Clara Henshaw, offered little explanation beyond supply chain issues and seasonal staffing difficulties. Elias wasn't convinced. He'd built this business on trust in his team, trust in his vision, and something told him that trust had been betrayed. So, he'd decided to see for himself. Not as Elias Grayson, the owner whose name adorned the retreat's logo, but as someone else entirely. He'd let his dark hair grow shaggy, traded his tailored suits for a worn flannel shirt and jeans, and adopted a new identity, Sam Wheeler, a drifter looking for seasonal work. With a fake ID and a backstory about needing cash after a rough year, he'd booked a week-long stay as a guest and secured a spot as a kitchen assistant. Most of the staff wouldn't recognize him. He'd always managed from a distance, leaving the day-to-day operations to Clara and her team. Now, he'd slip into their world unnoticed, a shadow among the workers, to uncover the truth. The lodge loomed ahead, its peaked roof dusted with fresh snow, the warm glow of its windows promising comfort that Elias suspected was a facade. He hefted his duffel bag over his shoulder and trudged toward the entrance, the wind tugging at his clothes. Inside, the lobby was as grand as he remembered, vaulted ceilings, a crackling fire, the faint hum of conversation from guests lounging on leather sofas. But there were cracks in the perfection, a flickering light above the check-in desk, a faint stain on the rug, a draft creeping in from somewhere it shouldn't. At the front desk, a young man with sunken eyes and a name tag reading, Tyler, barely looked up from his computer. "Name?" he asked, his voice flat. "Sam Wheeler," Elias said, sliding his ID across the counter. Tyler tapped a few keys, his movements sluggish. "Room 312. 3rd floor. Elevators are down the hall." He handed over a key card without meeting Elias's gaze, no smile, no welcome, just a rote delivery that felt rehearsed and hollow. "Long day?" Elias asked, testing the waters. Tyler shrugged. "They're all long. Enjoy your stay." The word sounded more like a dismissal than a wish. Elias nodded and headed toward the elevators, his mind already churning. The lack of warmth from Tyler wasn't just fatigue, it was apathy. Something was rotting beneath the surface here, and he intended to find out what. His first shift in the kitchen started the next morning at dawn. The air was thick with the smell of grease and burnt coffee as he stepped into the bustling chaos of the back-of-house. Pots clanged, voices shouted over the hiss of sizzling pans, and a harried woman with flower-streaked arms waved him over. Her name tag read Marta, and her dark eyes sized him up with a mix of skepticism and exhaustion. "You're the new guy?" "Sam?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's me," Elias said, offering a small smile. Marta didn't return it. "Great. Another warm body." Look, we're short-staffed, so don't expect a tour. Grab a knife and start chopping onions. We've got a breakfast rush in an hour, and I'm not about to let these spoiled guests complain about cold eggs again. Elias nodded and got to work, his hands moving with a practiced ease he hadn't used since his early days cooking in a diner to pay for college. The kitchen was a whirlwind, too few people doing too much, their faces etched with strain. Marta barked orders, but there was a tremor in her voice, a weariness that went beyond a single busy morning. As he diced onions, Elias listened to the chatter around him. "Clara's on us again about overtime," a wiry cook named Jamal muttered as he flipped pancakes. "Says we can't clock more than 40 hours, but how are we supposed to keep up with this?" "Tell me about it," a dishwasher named Priya replied, scrubbing a pot with furious energy. "I've been here 12 hours straight because no one showed up for the night shift. If I complain, she'll just say, 'Figure it out.'" Elias kept his head down, his jaw tightening. Clara was supposed to be his eyes and ears, not the source of this mess. He needed more than whispers, he needed proof. Later that day, after the breakfast rush slowed, Elias took a break and wandered the lodge as a guest. The dining hall was half empty, the food lukewarm despite the kitchen's efforts. He overheard a couple at a nearby table grumbling about a broken hot tub and a heater that wouldn't turn on. When he tested the trails, he found unplowed paths and a ski lift stuttering from neglect. The signs were everywhere, a retreat falling apart, not from lack of potential, but from lack of care. That night, as he sipped a beer in the dimly lit employee lounge, the storm outside intensified, rattling the windows. He'd slipped out for air when a sound stopped him in his tracks, a soft, broken sob cutting through the wind. He followed it to a secluded corner near the staff quarters, where a figure sat hunched on a bench, shivering in a thin jacket. It was Priya, the dishwasher, her hands trembling as she clutched a cigarette she couldn't seem to light. "Hey," Elias said gently, stepping closer. "You okay?" She startled, swiping at her eyes. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just, cold." "You don't sound fine," he said, sitting beside her uninvited. "What's going on?" Priya hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. "It's this place. I've been here 6 months, and it's killing me. We're stretched so thin, me, Marta, all of us. Clara doesn't care. She just keeps pushing, and if we break, she'll replace us like we're nothing." Elias's chest tightened. "Have you told anyone higher up?" She laughed bitterly. "Who? Corporate? They don't even know we exist. Clara makes sure of that. She's got her little kingdom here, and we're just the peasants." "How long can you keep going like this?" he asked. "Not much longer," Priya admitted, her voice cracking. "I'm done after this week. I can't take it anymore." Elias stared into the swirling snow, guilt and anger warring within him. This was his retreat, his dream, and it had become a nightmare for the people keeping it alive. Priya's words echoed in his mind as he stood. "Things can change," he said quietly. She snorted. "Yeah, right." But Elias meant it. He'd seen enough to know the root of the rot, and tomorrow, he'd start digging it out. The storm had settled into a steady rhythm by morning, snow falling in thick, silent sheets over Silver Crest Retreat. Elias Grayson woke early, his breath visible in the chilly air of room 312. The heater rattled faintly, a feeble protest against the cold seeping through the walls. He'd slept fitfully, Priya's tear-streaked face and trembling voice replaying in his mind. Her despair wasn't isolated, it was a symptom of a deeper sickness, one he'd let fester under Clara Henshaw's watch. Today, he'd peel back more layers, gather the evidence he needed to act. As Sam Wheeler, he still had a role to play, and he intended to play it well. After a quick shower in lukewarm water, another sign of the retreat's decline, he headed to the kitchen for his second shift. The chaos was no less intense than the day before. Marta greeted him with a curt nod, her flour-dusted hands already kneading dough for the lunch rush. "You're back," she said, her tone a mix of surprise and grudging approval. "Most newbies don't make it past day one." "I'm tougher than I look," Elias replied, grabbing a cutting board and a pile of carrots. He kept his voice light, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail, the cracked tile underfoot, the flickering bulb overhead, the way Jamal's shoulders slumped as he stirred a pot of soup. The morning wore on, and Elias worked alongside the crew, listening as their frustrations spilled out in snippets. "The walk-in fridge is acting up again," Priya grumbled, hauling a crate of vegetables past him. "I told Clara last week, but she said it's not in the budget to fix it." "Same with the ovens," Marta added, slamming a tray of rolls into one that sputtered and smoked. "Half the time they don't heat evenly. Guests send back burnt food, and guess who gets the blame?" Elias nodded sympathetically, his mind cataloging each complaint. Clara wasn't just overworking her staff, she was letting the retreat's infrastructure crumble. He'd seen the financials before coming here, the retreat was still turning a profit, albeit a shrinking one. Where was the money going if not into maintenance and staffing? During a lull, Elias slipped away to explore more of the lodge. Posing as a guest, he wandered the halls, testing doors and peering into corners. The gym's treadmill was out of order, a handwritten, broken sign taped to it. The indoor pool had a faint green tinge, the water cloudy from neglect. In the spa, a guest complained loudly to a frazzled attendant about a massage table that wouldn't adjust. Each flaw was a thread, and Elias was tugging them together into a tapestry of mismanagement. Back in the kitchen for the lunch shift, he overheard a conversation that tightened the knot in his gut. Jamal and a server named Leo were huddled near the dish station, their voices low but urgent. "Clara's been on my case about the inventory," Jamal said, scrubbing a pan. "Says we're using too much, but how am I supposed to cook for a full house with half the supplies?" "She told me the same about the bar," Leo replied, shaking his head. "Guests are pissed because we're out of half the wines on the menu. She keeps saying, make do, but there's nothing to make do with." Elias paused mid-chop, his knife hovering over a potato. Supplies running low, equipment breaking down, staff stretched to the breaking point, it all pointed to Clara cutting corners, likely pocketing the savings or redirecting funds somewhere else. He needed to see her in action, gauge her response to the chaos she'd created. That afternoon, he got his chance. A pipe burst in one of the guest suites, flooding the carpet and sending a panicked housekeeper running to the kitchen for help. "It's a mess up there," she said, breathless. "Clara's in the office, someone's got to tell her." "I'll go," Elias volunteered, seizing the opportunity. He followed the housekeeper, a quiet woman named Rosa, to the administrative wing. The office door was ajar, and Clara's voice drifted out, sharp and impatient. "I don't care how it happened, just fix it before the guests start screaming." Elias stepped inside, catching Clara mid-rant. She was a tall woman with a severe bob and eyes that darted like a hawk's, perched behind a cluttered desk. "Who are you?" she snapped, barely glancing at him. "Sam Wheeler," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "Kitchen assistant. There's a flood in suite 204. Maintenance is swamped, thought you should know." Clara's lips thinned. "Of course they are. Fine, tell Rosa to mop it up and put out some towels. We'll deal with it later." "It's pretty bad," Elias pressed. "Water's soaking into the walls. Could be a bigger problem if it's not handled now." She glared at him, her patience fraying. "Look, Sam, I don't need a lecture from the kitchen guy. We're short on plumbers, and I'm not calling in an emergency crew for a little leak. Tell Rosa to handle it, or she can find another job." Elias held her gaze for a moment, then nodded and stepped out. Rosa's face fell when he relayed the message. "She always does this," she muttered, grabbing a bucket. piles it on us and acts like it's our fault. The encounter left a sour taste in Elias's mouth. Clara wasn't just negligent, she was dismissive, treating her staff like disposable tools. He spent the rest of the day shadowing maintenance, where a grizzled worker named Hank confirmed his suspicions. "We've been begging for a new boiler for months," Hank said, wrenching a rusty valve. "Clara keeps saying, next quarter, but it never comes. This whole place is one breakdown away from shutting down." That evening, Elias retreated to the employee lounge, nursing a coffee as the storm raged outside. The room was cramped and dim, the furniture worn, a stark contrast to the luxury of the guest areas. He was jotting notes in his head when the door creaked open, and Marta slipped in, her face drawn with exhaustion. She sank into a chair across from him, rubbing her temples. "You're still here," she said, eyeing him. "Most people would have bolted by now." "Guess I'm stubborn," Elias replied. "You look like you've had a hell of a day." Marta snorted. "Try a hell of a year. This place used to be good, you know. Decent pay, fair hours. Then Clara took over, and it's been downhill ever since. She's squeezing us dry, and no one upstairs cares." "Have you tried telling them?" Elias asked, leaning forward. "Who? The owner?" Marta laughed bitterly. "He's some rich guy who doesn't even show his face. Clara's got us locked down, says she'll fire anyone who goes over her head." Elias's fists clenched under the table. He'd trusted Clara to uphold his vision, and she'd turned it into a prison for the people he relied on. "That's not right," he said quietly. "No kidding," Marta replied. "But what can we do? Quit? Half of us can't afford to. We're stuck." "Not forever," Elias said, his voice firm. "Things can change." Marta studied him, her skepticism softening into curiosity. "You're weird, Sam. Most newbies don't talk like that." He shrugged, offering a faint smile. "Maybe I'm not most newbies." She didn't press, but her gaze lingered as she stood and left. Alone again, Elias stared out the window at the snow-blurred peaks. He'd seen enough. Clara's reign was a cancer, spreading neglect and despair through his retreat. Tomorrow, he'd confront it head-on. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one he was about to unleash. Word count, 1,500. The snow had piled high by the third morning, blanketing Silver Crest Retreat in a deceptive calm. Elias Grayson rose with the dawn, the faint glow of sunrise filtering through the frost on his window. The room was still cold, the heater's feeble hum a reminder of the neglect he'd uncovered. Today wasn't about blending in, it was about tearing down the walls Clara Henshaw had built around his dream. As Sam Wheeler, he'd gathered the threads of discontent. As Elias Grayson, he'd weave them into action. He dressed quickly, trading his flannel for a crisp button-down he'd stashed in his duffel, a subtle signal of the shift to come. Downstairs, the lodge buzzed with its usual chaos, guests milling in the lobby, staff scurrying to keep up. Elias bypassed the kitchen, where Marta and the crew were already prepping breakfast, and headed straight for the administrative wing. His pulse was steady, his resolve ironclad. He'd seen the toll of Clara's mismanagement in Priya's tears, Marta's exhaustion, Hank's frustration. It ended now. The office door was closed when he arrived, but through the glass panel, he saw Clara hunched over her desk, scribbling furiously on a clipboard. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, her expression pinched with irritation. Elias didn't knock, he pushed the door open and stepped inside, letting it swing shut behind him with a soft thud. Clara's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What the hell, Sam? You can't just barge in here." "I'm not Sam," Elias said, his voice low and even. He pulled off the knit cap he'd been wearing, letting his features settle into their natural authority. "I'm Elias Grayson." Her face went slack, the clipboard slipping from her hand to clatter on the desk. For a moment, she was speechless, her hawk-like gaze darting as if searching for an escape. Then she recovered, forcing a tight smile. Mr. Grayson. This is unexpected. What brings you here? I've been here, he said, stepping closer. For 3 days. Working in your kitchen, talking to your staff, seeing what you've done to this place. Clara's smile faltered, but she straightened, folding her arms. I don't know what you think you've seen, but I've been keeping this retreat afloat. It's not easy with the labor shortages and... Spare me, Elias cut in, his tone sharp enough to slice through her excuses. I've heard it all, supply chain issues, seasonal challenges. But what I've seen is a lodge falling apart because you've been running it into the ground. Overworked staff, broken equipment, unhappy guests. Where's the money, Clara? We're still profitable, why isn't it going back into this place? Her jaw tightened, a flush creeping up her neck. I've made tough calls to keep us in the black. You don't know what it's like down here, dealing with the day-to-day. I do now, Elias said. I've chopped onions with Marta, mopped floors with Rosa, fixed pipes with Hank. I've listened to them, really listened. They're drowning because you've cut corners at every turn. You've hoarded resources, ignored their pleas, and silenced anyone who dared complain. Clara's eyes flashed with defiance. You think you can waltz in after years of being absent and judge me? I've kept this place running while you sat in your fancy office. The staff whine because they're lazy, always wanting more without earning it. Elias took a step forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Lazy? Priya's working 12-hour shifts because you won't hire enough people. Marta's cooking on broken ovens because you won't replace them. Hank's patching a boiler that should have been scrapped months ago. That's not laziness, that's desperation. And it's on you. Clara opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands clenching into fists. If you'd been here, you'd know how hard it is to. I trusted you, Elias interrupted. I gave you the reins because I believed you'd uphold what I built. Instead, you've turned it into a sweatshop. You're done, Clara. Pack your things. Security's on their way. Her face went red, then pale. You can't fire me. I've given everything to this place. You've taken everything, Elias shot back. From the staff, from the guests, from me. Get out. For a moment, she looked like she'd argue, her lips trembling with rage. Then she grabbed her coat and a handful of files, storming past him without another word. The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing in the small office. Elias exhaled slowly, the weight of the confrontation settling into his bones. It wasn't over, not yet. He stepped into the hall, where a wide-eyed assistant named Jenna stared at him from her desk. She's gone, he said simply. Things are changing, starting now. Spread the word, I want the department leads in the lounge in 20 minutes. Jenna nodded, her fingers already flying over her keyboard. Elias headed to the employee lounge, his mind racing with what came next. The room was empty when he arrived, its worn chairs and chipped tables a stark reminder of the neglect he'd let creep in. He stood by the window, watching the snow swirl, until the door creaked open and the leads filed in, Marta from the kitchen, Hank from maintenance, Rosa from housekeeping, and Tyler from the front desk. Their expressions ranged from wary to outright skeptical, their postures slumped with the fatigue of too many hard days. I know you don't trust me yet, Elias began, turning to face them. And I don't blame you. I'm Elias Grayson, the owner, and I've been here undercover as Sam Wheeler. I've seen what you're up against, the long hours, the broken tools, the impossible demands. It's not right, and it's not what I built this place to be. A murmur rippled through the group, surprise mixing with doubt. Marta crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. So what? You're here to play hero now? I'm here to fix it, Elias said firmly. Clara's gone. She was the bottleneck, but I'm not pretending I'm blameless. I should have checked in sooner. Now I'm asking you, what do you need? No filters, no middlemen. Tell me. Hank spoke first, his gravelly voice hesitant. We need a new boiler. The one we've got is a lawsuit waiting to happen. And more hands, 2, maybe 3 guys on my crew. Done, Elias said. What else? Rosa shifted, her voice soft but steady. Housekeeping's down to 5 people for the whole lodge. We can't keep up. And the vacuums, half of them don't work. New vacuums by next week, Elias promised. And I'll hire 10 more for your team. Keep going. Marta leaned forward, her skepticism softening. Kitchen needs ovens that don't burn everything. And supplies, real stock, not scraps. We're feeding people, not pigs. You'll have it, Elias said. Tyler? The front desk clerk shrugged, still guarded. We're understaffed too. And the computers crash every other day, guests get mad when check-in takes forever. New systems and 3 more clerks, Elias replied. Anything else? The room fell silent, the leads exchanging glances. It was Rosa who broke it, her eyes glistening. You mean it? This isn't just talk. I mean it, Elias said, meeting her gaze. This retreat was built on people, guests and staff. If you're not taken care of, it fails. I'm here to make it right. Marta nodded slowly, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. Okay, Sam, Elias. We'll see. The meeting ended with tentative agreement, the leads dispersing to share the news. Elias stayed behind, staring out at the snow. He'd taken the first step, cut out the rot, opened the lines. But trust wasn't won in a single morning. Tomorrow, he'd start rebuilding, brick by brick, with the people who'd kept his dream alive despite the odds. The snow had stopped falling by the 4th day, leaving Silver Crest Retreat draped in a pristine white that gleamed under the morning sun. Elias Grayson stood on the lodge's wide porch, a mug of coffee warming his hands as he surveyed the slopes beyond. The air was crisp, the silence profound, a stark contrast to the storm of change he'd unleashed within these walls. Clara was gone, the staff's voices had been heard, and now the real work began. He wasn't just repairing a business, he was resurrecting a vision, and it would take more than promises to make it stick. Inside, the lodge hummed with a cautious energy. Word of Clara's exit and Elias's pledges had spread like wildfire, igniting whispers of hope among the staff. But hope was fragile, easily snuffed out by broken trust. Elias knew he had to act fast, show them, not just tell them, that this was a new beginning. He'd spent the night on the phone with suppliers, contractors, and his HR team, setting plans in motion. Today, he'd roll up his sleeves and prove he was in this with them. His first stop was the kitchen. Marta was there, kneading dough with a focus that bordered on ferocity. The crew bustled around her, their movements quicker than before, though their faces still carried the weight of doubt. Elias stepped in, tying an apron around his waist. Mind if I join you? He asked. Marta glanced up, one eyebrow arching. You're the boss now. Don't need my permission. I'm not here as the boss, Elias said, grabbing a knife and a pile of onions. I'm here as Sam, or Elias, if you prefer. Either way, I'm pitching in. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fine. Don't cry too much over those onions. He chuckled and got to work, the familiar rhythm of chopping grounding him. As the morning wore on, he bantered with Jamal about spices, helped Priya unload a delivery of fresh produce, supplies he'd expedited overnight, and swapped stories with Marta about their worst kitchen disasters. Slowly, the tension eased, replaced by a tentative camaraderie. When a new oven arrived mid-shift, gleaming and state-of-the-art, Marta's skeptical frown softened into a rare smile. You weren't kidding, she said, running a hand over the stainless steel. I don't kid about food, Elias replied. Or people. Next, he joined Hank in the basement, where the maintenance crew was wrestling with the ancient boiler. A team of plumbers had arrived, hauling in a replacement unit Elias had sourced from a nearby supplier. Hank wiped sweat from his brow as they watched the old machine get dismantled. Never thought I'd see this day, he admitted. Clara kept saying it'd hold. It shouldn't have had to, Elias said, handing him a wrench. You've been holding this place together with duct tape and grit. That changes now. Hank grunted, but there was a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. By afternoon, the new boiler hummed to life, pumping steady heat through the lodge for the first time in months. Elias stayed, tightening bolts and hauling debris, his shirt stained with grease. The crew didn't say much, but their nods of approval spoke volumes. In housekeeping, Rosa greeted him with a shy smile as he delivered a stack of new vacuums and introduced 3 new hires, recruits he'd pulled from a local job fair he'd called in favors to organize. This is a start, he told her, helping her unpack the equipment. More are coming. You won't be stretched thin anymore. Rosa's hands trembled slightly as she plugged in a vacuum, its powerful hum drowning out the silence. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't think anyone cared. I do, Elias said simply. And I should have sooner. By evening, the front desk buzzed with new energy. Tyler and his team worked on freshly installed computers, their screens no longer freezing mid-check-in. 2 additional clerks shadowed them, learning the ropes. Elias lingered, chatting with guests who noticed the smoother service, their complaints replaced by cautious praise. He overheard a couple marveling at the warmth in their room, a small victory that fueled his resolve. As night fell, Elias called the staff together in the employee lounge, now brighter, thanks to new bulbs he'd had swapped out. The room was packed, faces ranging from curious to hopeful. He stood at the front, no podium, no pretense, just a man in a stained shirt facing the people he'd failed. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice steady. I built this retreat to be a refuge, for guests and for you. Somewhere along the line, I let it slip. I trusted the wrong person, and you paid the price. That's on me. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until we get this right. He paused, letting the words settle. You're not just workers, you're the heart of this place. I've ordered new equipment, hired more hands, and I'm raising pay across the board, retroactive for the last 6 months. You've earned it. But I need your help. Tell me what works, what doesn't. No more silence. We rebuild this together. A ripple of murmur spread, then quieted as Marta stepped forward, her arms crossed but her eyes alight. You're serious about this? Dead serious, Elias said. I'm staying on site for the next month, working with you, listening to you. This isn't a quick fix. It's a promise. Hank cleared his throat. What about the guests? They've been griping for months. We'll win them back, Elias replied. Better service, better rooms, better everything. Word'll spread. But it starts with you being taken care of. Priya spoke up, her voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. And if it doesn't work? If you leave again? Elias met her gaze. I won't. This is my home as much as it's yours. If it fails, I fail with it. But I don't plan on failing. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Then Rosa clapped, softly at first, joined by Hank, then Marta, until the sound filled the space. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real, a spark of trust reigniting. Over the next weeks, Elias kept his word. He worked shifts, met with suppliers, and sat with staff over coffee, hashing out ideas. The lodge transformed, new paint on the walls, repaired trails, a hot tub that bubbled again. Guest reviews ticked upward, tentative 5 stars replacing the scathing ones. The staff laughed more, their shoulders less bowed. Priya stayed past her quitting date, her cigarette breaks replaced by chats with coworkers. Marta started experimenting with new recipes, her passion rekindled. Hank trained his new crew with a gruff pride. One evening, as Elias stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the peaks gold, Marta joined him, a mug in her hand. "You're still here," she said, a faint tease in her tone. "Told you I would be," he replied, smiling. She nodded, gazing at the horizon. "It's different now. Better. Don't screw it up." "I won't," he said, and he meant it. The retreat wasn't perfect, not yet. But it was healing, rising from the ashes of neglect into something stronger. Elias had come undercover to save his business, but he'd found something more, a team worth fighting for, a purpose worth keeping. The mountain stretched before him, vast and enduring, a mirror to the resilience he'd rediscovered within these walls. This was his legacy, and he'd guard it with everything he had.